If you want all of your data in one place, if you want a single home for all of your entities, if you want to spend more time working and less time searching, you need the Intuit ERP. I know because I'm Damon John, and I run my growing business on Intuit Enterprise Suite, the AI native ERP that's powerful, painless, and proven. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
I think that in a certain part of our own path to wholeness and our embodying, letting go of having our defenses and our psychology and how we protect ourselves, that when we are going to really burst forth and become who we really are, maybe that Marianne Williamson quote, that it's not, we're afraid of being the greatness, the love, the wholeness that we can be. If we're going to get to that place where we can do that, I think it's similar to a diamond being made.
Taking a minute to be myself, don't need no help. We keep on rising.
Okay, we are back. I am really looking forward to this conversation, everyone. I hope you are well. This is Unlocking Commerce and Business again. I'm Connie Davis, your hostess. Today we are going to we're going to unpack some more around commerce and the currency that none of us learned how to spend, the truth of who we really are. And I want you to just kind of lean in today because my guest is going to tell you a little bit about a fear that could be so old, that could be so set in our bodies. And in her case, it was in her body before she really had words for it. And it could be these areas where it kind of just, it helps you figure out like there's something down there. And we're going to talk about what happens when the outer world pushes on an old wound. And it might feel like a volcano going off inside of you. So Hertha Lund is with us here. And I just wanted to set the stage a little bit for the audience because they're used to us kind of exploring these commerce shows. And Hertha and I have been able to have some interesting conversations and workshops as we've gotten to know each other. And I'm really excited to have her on the show. Hertha Lund, thank you and welcome to Unlocking Commerce and Business.
I'm so happy to be here with you today, Connie, and to have this conversation. I'm aware we're going to talk about some deep, hard things, but let's do it.
Yeah. I love playing with and dancing with my guests on the show because they never quite know where I'm going to take them. And it's always a little bit of a surprise, but thank you for being, such a kind spirit, willing to lean in and talk a little bit about what I think is going to resonate with our listeners really well today. And I want to start somewhere where most people probably don't start in an interview. And I've gotten to know you and some of the really important, critical work that you've done in yourself. And you've got some incredible stories that just touched my heart, when we met back in May. And after, some experiences and what it's taken you to really heal, I want you to take us back there. And I want you to think about that promise that you made and tell the audience a little bit about this promise that you made and what triggered it and how it's really taken you on this journey. And I think that's, partly probably your background, a little bit of what took you there and your story. And then we're going to come out of it and explore a little bit more from there.
Sure. I'll come back to this, but 11 years ago, I died and came back. But to set that up a little bit more, I grew up on a ranch in Montana, which was very ideal. And I had heaven outside with my horses and out in nature. But inside the house, my mom was really not mom material. She'd had some issues in her childhood that she didn't heal. And it was projected onto me as the oldest daughter. And in fact, at 5 or 6, I couldn't find my shoes, and she choked me. Almost, she could have killed me, and she dropped me before I stopped breathing, and she left. That was her way of handling it because she couldn't handle herself. But there were other things she did, and I know that she had her own trauma, and she chose to drink alcohol. So that was my first big trauma. But the second one is around the same time I was sexually molested by a neighborhood teenager. And I never told anybody because I was afraid my mom would kill him, and that would be bad for our family. So I packed those into my being and I carried them with me. And instead of, I could have slid off into being an alcoholic like my mom, but I made decisions not to do that, mostly because I was an overachiever. And I played basketball and rodeo in high school. I was in a state national champion, the top 10, state champion at multiple sports. And I played basketball, and I played both those sports in college. So, and I was also a pre-vet, pre-med student. So all of that helped me keep myself together to succeed. And then I took some time off, managed a ranch, was a horseshoer and a blacksmith, finished my schooling as a journalist and covered Congress in Washington, D.C., and decided to go to law school. Guess what? Becoming a lawyer and being a lawyer was the best thing I could do to overwork and always keep moving towards a goal and never face my fears or the inner pain. So I've had a successful 31-year attorney career. I know I don't look that old, but I am 64. I think dying and coming back makes a difference. But by being a lawyer, I kept very busy, and I always had goals that I had to meet, and they were very important for the client. So it kept me on a trajectory of always moving forward, never stopping or slowing down to feel. And 11 years ago, it caught up to me. And for that whole year, I'd had problems in and out of the emergency room with inflammation around my heart, which was pericarditis. And it steadily got worse. And pretty soon I ended up in the emergency room, and I go to a heart doctor, and I said, I think you should admit me. And he asked me why, and I told him why. And he said, I'm going to admit you. And so my CRP score was 187. Doctors get nervous if it's more than 7.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah. I was off the charts, and everything in my body hurt. My teeth fillings hurt. And I didn't go to the regular floor, and I didn't go to ICU. There's a floor in between, and it's where they take people after heart surgery, after they're out of intensive care. And I went right to that floor. I wasn't intubated, but I was on oxygen all the time. And people around me at night, I'd be laying there. And of course, I hurt so bad I couldn't really sleep. But people coded and left their bodies. And so I witnessed that. And so I was talking to God one night, and it's like, well, I could die. It's like, well, yes, you could. And I'm like, well, I don't really like it here. It's been a shit show. And I'm like, oh, I shouldn't talk to God that way. But I was. I mean, in all my glory. And so I thought about it, and I thought, it's true. I could be dying, and I am not thinking about what I won. I'm not thinking about the money I've made. I'm not thinking about my outer success. All I can think about, this is giving me spirit tingles as I'm telling you, all I could think about was love, who and what I loved in God. Nothing else mattered. And I kind of laughed. I'm like, well, it's true. When we die, we don't think about all those other things, And as soon as I was in this vibration, all of a sudden, I was encapsulated in this huge tube of light. It was bigger than one can comprehend in our human consciousness. And it went out way around me, beyond where I can reach. And then I started just going up, up, up. And as I was ascending, I felt one with light. Pretty soon I was like walking in the Milky Way. Everything shifted, and it was a glorious feeling, a greater feeling of oneness and love and light than one can imagine. I felt like a little 4-year-old running to my heavenly parents' lap. And then I realized that I wasn't done. I didn't finish my reason for coming into embodiment. And I knew I was going to talk to somebody soon. And I felt like I had a nanosecond. And so I went deep within. I went in my heart. I just kind of skipped my head, went into my heart. And I also used my gut, which has always kind of interested me because I don't know why, but the two of those together, and I made 2 promises. I said, okay, I promise to do whatever it takes to heal and to get back into my body. And by that, I didn't know why I did that. And I'll tell you more, remind me if I forget to tell you why I said that. And so as soon as I made the promise, then I fell. I just came right back down that tube of light, right back into my body. It was just horrible. I mean, I come from feeling light and love to getting in this really sick, heavy body. I felt like I was crawling into a dead elk carcass laying on the interstate of life. And I was granted to come back to my body. I was not granted immediate healing. It was my job to heal. And so my first assignment with a greater wisdom that I returned to earth with is I had to learn how to sleep. I had not slept for decades. I had chronic pain from keeping all that trauma stuck in my body. I had, and endometriosis, fibromyalgia, severe migraines, and I also had some low back pain from being a horseshoer and doing so much physical work. So between all of those, I was constantly in pain, and it would keep me from sleeping. It took me 2 years after this, being in the hospital and getting back out, to be able to learn how to sleep. I had to, change it up, retrain my body, retrain my consciousness. And one morning I woke up and I felt my chest, and I told my husband, I said, I'm a championship sleeper. So I got my first assignment done, what it took to heal. And I think it's necessary for all of us. We will not have the energy in the body, the currency, to be able to heal unless we rest. That's one of the things that's necessary. So since then, I've done multiple healing modalities, many different ones. And one of the ones I became an equine gestalt coach. So I work with horses, and they're like truth barometers. If we're with them and we're not congruent, or we don't have, we're not aware of what's energy, what's going on in our emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental bodies, they will let us know and help me find kind of that true point of alignment. So that's what I've worked on with them. And the reason that I had to get back into my body is that I had a super masterous skill of disassociating. That's how I dealt with my pain, is I could jump out of my body and kind of exist outside of it. And I thought that the only reason I had a body was to get my head from my pillow to my desk. And that is not a good way to live. I am so grateful that I'm back now and I have this opportunity to get a reset and start over. And the body is incredibly important because it's honest. We can get tricked when we're just working with our mind and our emotions, and everything seems real. So the body is kind of more like a horse. It's a truth barometer if we learn how to get in it and experience life through it. So I think I answered your question. Oh, I can't hear you now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on mute.
Okay.
Sorry, Hertha. Thank you for that. And, for sharing the truth that you did and the vulnerability. That's not I can tell that you've gotten very comfortable with telling some of those stories, and they matter because, I wrote down a couple of words when I was listening to the story, and I heard, when you said disassociate, I heard avoid and escape and sleep, sleeplessness, and the body being this kind of wallet. If we put it into monetary terms, the body is the wallet, and it's holding our capital, our resources, our energy, right? Our currency. And, we don't think about it that way. We think about humans transacting with other humans, buying through technology. That's whenever I've asked someone, what does commerce mean to you? And we usually talk about that on this show. It's a different type of a response. But when we bring them back to, we have a home economy going on in our own vessel, in our own homes. And, we really start thinking about what kind of transactions are we having with ourselves? And I think you just described some of the most common transactions that people have with themselves and their own bodies and their own spirits and minds. And we just don't think about that in traditional sense. I'm coming from the financial world, you're coming from the attorney's world, and we just think about the types of exchanges that happen in those industries in business.
Right.
But what about the humans that are having those exchanges? And what's happening to their wallet, to their vessels?
Right. So to speak about what had happened to me is that I had overdrawn my account to the nth degree. I mean, I was basically bankrupt. And because I had spent every bit of energy that I had, and I know it's grace and the fact that I got to come back, that I was able to work, to put it together. And I actually had an awareness that, for a long time, the healing for me was like paying off a mortgage or a big note. At first, you can only pay the interest. And I'm like, oh my God, how long am I going to have to feel this and keep working to heal and doing everything I can to get more energy together in my body so that I can have the flow of healing? And I don't know when it changed, but at some point I was aware that I was no longer paying interest and that I had paid that I was into the principal. And then at some point, the light in my body started, being like compounding. All of a sudden now I'm not only out of debt, but I have enough light that it compounds and I get more each day. But I still have to be very careful to not ignore the basic economy or the balance of the energy system in my body and everything, the choices I make, the thoughts I have, the consciousness, the vibration I choose to live in, because any one of those can, I can go backwards, in any time, any day, unless I'm kind of aware and keep, my bank account, my inner commerce clean, so to speak.
Absolutely. And, I feel like it's really important to kind of go back to your mom for a second, because you mentioned there was an exchange, and that exchange put you into a negative state for a while. And you were probably in an overdrawn relationship from, that experience. And it probably created some contracts. We'll use some attorney language here, and some contracts and some belief systems that probably impacted you. And, I don't know that people in their everyday unconscious kind of just going about getting life done. How did you figure out that you needed to make that shift as well? Was it the near-death experience, or was it something prior that you started kind of inventorying what might have been contracts and agreements that you were living by?
Well, I would love to say that I was enough aware that before dying, I looked into that. I certainly was aware it was there, but it is my unprocessed emotions, pain, terror, despair. I did have some anger, but that was not what I led with. But it was underneath, and it was driving me, but I did not want to look at it. And I did not unpack it until after I made the promise to God when I came back. And I might not have done it without that promise, but I recommend to anyone, don't wait till you die, because it's just, I'm very aware that it was a big grace for me to come back. So I would say, if you're aware that there's something you need to work on, I would encourage you to have courage without having the near-death experience. I wish I would have done so earlier. So then I still had to unpack it one step at a time, because when there's so much, it's just like, if I have, think about it. If I have a mortgage and I have credit card debt and I have all this going on, all this going out, I can't solve it in one day. And if you and I are going to try to merge our businesses, we have to start thinking about very carefully how we're going to put it all together. Well, healing for me was the same thing. I had to unpack one thing at a time, upgrade, and then use that as a platform to upgrade more. It was a continually energetic and a shifting. And I'm fairly intuitive. I mean, I'm a good, very, it seems to be one of my natural gifts to be a coach and to sit with people and to be with my horses. And I love it very much. So you'd think I would have this awareness. Oh no, I was still pretty blind to what was going on inside. I think as humans, we have an immense capacity to try to avoid those places that we need to go and experience. And Jung talked about making the unconscious conscious, or the subconscious conscious, and about our shadow. And I'm very intimately aware of those concepts now from a lived experience. And I certainly did not want to see and feel some of the stuff that was still packed down inside of me. Mm-hmm. And just recently, so part of my dream of coming back is I've always seen myself speaking to thousands of people and sharing, inspiring people to find their path to wholeness. And so after, the last few years, I've been working very hard, earnestly, to upgrade my speaking skills. Now, note, I was in speaking contests from age 9. I talked to juries. I talk a lot. But I wanted to get to be the best I could be, and the best vehicle and instrument, so that people could get what they needed from my talks to go to their next step. So I've, invested in coaching and really worked hard. And I was very earnest in doing this process. And then something happened where, I thought, it seemed like something went wrong, and my coach was there. And of course, with my makeup, I've never let any woman direct me, because that would be, I was not ever going to let a woman direct me, because my mom, I'll take care of myself. I'm very reliant. Just a side story. I had two, instead of a full set of golf clubs, I had a putter and a driver. So I could either drive and go for the big one. That was my badass lawyer. I'm tough, don't need anything. Or I've got a putter. I'm like a wounded 5-year-old. I had no middle game, no middle tools. And so, for my lawyer job, it was great that I had a driver, and I'm going to take care of you and I can do it very competently. But the fact that I didn't have anything in between that wounded part, that meant that I was never going to put myself in the place where I depended on somebody for something I needed. Like, that was important for my life. So you think about how that would impact my close relationships. Yeah. I'm here, I love you, but I'm not going to really depend on you. So I had that going on. But to measure up my speaking skills, I hired a coach. And so I did depend on her because it meant so much to me to increase my skills. And so in that relationship, again, I thought that I had done something wrong. And I really went into that small part of me. And it turned out that it was like the perfect paradox, a perfect setup that I went through. I fell into my stuff. And I literally, this is stuff that even though I'd done lots of work, paid lots of money to get whole, there was still this place that I was keeping, tucked down inside of me. And it was deep in my, right in my soul, below my belly button, below my, it wasn't base issues, but it's that second, the seat of the soul, I call it, that's where I think our soul anchors in our body. And that's where my trauma was still stuck. And so I fell into that and I lost it for a few days, but I had to actually go and give another talk after that. So I had to pull myself together to deliver, and I'm very responsible. So that actually helped me to make the next steps. And by having that, it was literally like an inner volcano. We talked about that a little bit ahead of time because of what I wrote, but it erupted inside of me. Now, it did not hardly get outside of me. I did end up sobbing and crying because I embodied that 5-year-old that was so terrified of disappointing somebody that I depended on and what would happen. Now, note, with my mom, it could be dangerous. Disappointing her could have caused her to do something that could harm me. And it certainly would hurt me emotionally. So it wasn't the wrong decision back then. But at 64, it was kind of getting in the way of a lot of my relationships. And so I finally saw it and I felt it, and it literally cracked me open. I mean, in an emotional way, in a spiritual way that it was humbling. It was scary at times. And again, I think it was the best thing that probably ever happened to me. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I just kept hearing the word, very spiritually while we were kind of listening to your story. I kept hearing this word renegotiate. Like you were renegotiating all of those contracts that had piled on that you had stuffed in there with, the trauma. And, you were renegotiating with yourself. And it takes incredible bravery and courage to be able to do that. Most people avoid that type of work their entire lives. So I commend you for, just being able to get that amount of work done. Because it's not something that, the normal mainstream person really pauses enough. And there's a lot of power in that pause. And we heard that before too. Can we go into a little bit more around this volcano? And can you describe when you start feeling that? Because I feel like there's a lot of moments, and we talked a little bit about this before, that individuals feel that coming up in their bodies. And we're at work, or we might be in rush hour traffic. We might be dealing with a tough person in a meeting. I've certainly had some tough characters in a meeting. And, you feel that coming up, and then what do you do with it? How do you move it through? And can you give the audience some tips and tools about that?
Sure. And let me also, I'm first going to share a little bit what I learned from the horses. So growing up, I rode a lot of young horses that weren't very well trained, and horses are extremely sensitive. So whatever we're thinking or feeling, they can think and feel. So if you're riding a green one that's not fully broke, it really matters how I comported myself, how I held myself together, and that gave the horse confidence. So I'm aware, and let's say I'm riding a horse and the horse gets spooky or is thinking about starting to buck. Then it becomes really important for me to embody leadership and to kind of maintain my alignment. Yeah. And so that I help the horse make a good decision and not go there. Now, it doesn't work all the time, But if I jump in the river with the horse, I'm confluent. They're scared. I'm scared. They're, gonna thinking about being cantankerous. I'm going to be cantankerous. All of a sudden I've just increased the bank account of an energy, in a way, a consciousness that isn't good for me. So I learned through life with that, of knowing that, sometimes when things start getting intense, especially with outer things, that it's time to sit chilly in the middle. That's what I used to think about it when I rode colts. You sit chilly in the middle, which means I'm going to stay. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to run a lot of energy through my body. I'm going to be very centered. And so I'd had that momentum. So when this happened with me, now I have felt anger, and I did have a very big emotional body. In that, I mean, I had lots of emotions that I hadn't processed. And for me, my emotions are intense. They're big and they're intense. And so I have had to learn how to live with that. This was a little bit even different than that, because when we have those, the first thing we want to be aware is, of is kind of riding that colt. It's like, oh boy, I feel this coming on, and it's kind of like the trauma response. Is there really anything going on in my world now that I need to be afraid of? Is there anything really going on right now that this anger will serve me? I mean, in gestalt, which is, I'm a trained coach in gestalt, we learn to know about our parts. We have different parts. And so we want to be able to, if I'm trying to win a case for you, Connie, and I get upset and I bring my angry person to your trial and I blow your trial, that's not a very good professional choice. We can have professional choices and higher consciousness about who we choose to bring to the party. So I'm working with, my husband and I don't see something eye to eye. I could choose to say, okay, I understand, I feel that. But I'm going to back up. I'm going to stay centered. I'm going to see how this unfolds. I'm going to be curious. If I show up this way, what happens next? And so I'm not abandoning myself, but I'm very carefully choosing not to embody and let out something in the volcano that will, harm life around me or myself. Because it takes too much energy, commerce, to clean up from that. So this was an inner volcano. And I happen to believe that we know that to make a diamond, it takes a lot of heat and a lot of pressure. I think that in a certain part of our own path to wholeness and our embodying, letting go of having our defenses and our psychology and how we protect ourselves, that when we are going to really burst forth and become who we really are, maybe that Marianne Williamson quote, that it's not, we're afraid of being the greatness, the love, the wholeness that we can be. If we're going to get to that place where we can do that, I think it's similar to a diamond being made. And so I had an inner process where the friction and that part that was so underneath and it was locked in. This is very amazing. I had surgery for endometriosis 40 years ago, 30 years ago, long time ago. And they found scar tissue that totally connected from one side of my pelvic to the other on the inside bowl. Wow. It was underneath and in between all my female organs. And it looked like it was lacunar and it was all like tied together. Now, they worked on that with surgery. And when this happened, I haven't thought about it for years. I'm like, oh my God. Inside of me, I had an energy pattern that was so, tying everything together. And I think to get everything moving and to where my energy can run clean, like my inner commerce can run clean, it had to go through this process of almost this extreme pressure and eruption. So it was more of an inner eruption that then caused me to, now I no longer have my defenses. So I'm not, it's like, well, who am I without that? I mean, and yet I still had to function in the world because I have a professional job. So obviously I developed a skill of being able to step into the role of my day-to-day life. But inwardly, there was so much changing. And when you're ready, I'm going to tell you how the horses helped me heal.
Oh, well, so again, I mean, I'm getting these little messages and these little whispers with everything that you say. And what I wanted to take the audience back to, because these types of patterns show up in how we're trying to attract a customer, service a relationship with a client. And so we don't get away from negotiating. We just might have to do more negotiating with ourselves sometimes. And I have definitely been on a maturation type of journey of emotions and mind. And, you're right. They absolutely lie to us sometimes. They make things out of a mountain, out of a molehill. Where did that expression come from, right? But when you said green, and you were talking about the horses that were green, I was thinking about this opportunity that we have out in business with young entrepreneurs and older business owners and entrepreneurs and or corporate leaders. And what came to me was when you said, I need that composure and I need to be able to align so that I can guide them. That's very similar to multi-generational type of mentoring that's needed, which is a part of the resource that you're trying to become for communities. You're phrasing it differently into ways that, just like you're guiding an animal, they need to learn how you're going to handle them. Our students and entrepreneurs need to learn how they're going to handle and carry the world that we're trying to hand them. And that's really important, I think, in this commerce of community. And we had an episode a few months ago about the great tsunami, the silver tsunami, meaning businesses that are getting ready to change hands, sell off, a transfer of assets from older generation to younger generation. And how do we do that in a way that we keep those centered in our communities because they're reliable businesses that people have come to know? And it's the same thing in your body that you're talking about. So I just wanted to call the audience's attention back. I don't know if you guys missed that or caught that, but that is a very important metaphor, I think, that Hertha just shared with us. And if you didn't pick up on it, I really just wanted to call your attention to that. So let's go back to the horses, though, because I feel like it was a great opportunity to kind of, okay, it's not just a human thing. We need to think about that with our animals and with, our relationships. Let's keep going.
Sure. So I'm going through this process of trying to keep my outer life kind of organized while my inner life is going through all these big changes. And I just so happened that a friend of mine was coming to Montana to teach dressage. And I've ridden Western, but I also ride English. And I have horses that haven't been ridden in dressage, but I'm like, I could do this. And I was prompted to follow, and I looked at my calendar, and this is probably the only weekend in the whole year that I'm going to have an opportunity to do this because of my schedule and her schedule. And I thought, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to take two horses. I'm going to take Monk and Nighthawk. And I'm not really in shape to ride for 2 hours a day, but I'm going to do it. And so I go there, and the first thing she shows me, now my horses to me help me understand what I call the four lower bodies. We have the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual. And Monk is the horse for me that reminds me of the spiritual body. And so Monk is this beautiful horse, but he's a little bit short, and he can actually look like a pony sometimes. And so I was riding him, and he's a mid-sized giraffe, so he's got a big chest. And he's got a lazy belly because he's got a lazy solar plexus. And so sometimes his belly kind of goes inverted and he gets a pot belly. And she taught me, she says, Hertha, I want you to get your solar plexus, and I want you to think that you have a pyramid, a cone inside your, you're basically the same place where the volcano was. So she is having me now put in the place of that volcano a pyramid, and to keep the energy coming up the pyramid. And that's how I'm going to draw his energy up through his thoracic spine to make him have a long top line and a stronger back. And when he does that, he looks fancy. He no longer looks like a potty pony. He looks like this beautiful, amazing horse. And so I'm doing this, concentrating, having my pyramid. Everything's going good. And so I'm literally in this process of working to ride him correctly and hold him together. I am literally going through the process of my own healing, of putting into place what had the energy that had kind of exploded. So now I'm creating a new paradigm. And she said, it's like, like when you do core exercises, she's like, if all your laundry was in a bundle up, like a big pile, and you just try to carry it all over, spilling out, blah, blah, blah. So now I have energy, money going everywhere. She says, I want you to organize that bundle and have it all wrapped up. And so now it's going to be a pyramid. So basically she's teaching me how to, to get my core where I have my some of my records from trauma, but also my emotions, and get it organized and use that as a way to lift up my horse.
Wow.
And so then she says, now think of yourself as a bridge, a suspension bridge. So you got to sit right, you got to hold him up, and you got this pyramid, you're bringing the energy up. And then from your mind, you're like, I'm the middle of the bridge, one of the suspensions. And so if I connect my head to his head, and then I can then lift him up. And I rode him like this, and he looked like, now this would be lower level dressage, but all of a sudden he's trotting around looking so fancy, and his rhythm was perfect. There was mud on the ground, it was mud puddles, and he's like, I mean, it's just beautiful. And that was done by me organizing my inner life. So that allowed his energy to flow into my energy and to totally change who and what he was in that lesson. And so the other horse that I took was Nighthawk. And Nighthawk actually, to me, is the way that I learned more about my shadow and my wounded soul. And so for him, he was more sensitive to me balancing right to left. And she said, so turn on can you flex move your left glute med? And that's a gluteus maximus, I think is how you say it. It's a muscle it's a little muscle, but it's right on the outside of our hip. And she asked me to move that, and I couldn't even find it. She had to come and put her hand on it. And what I realized is that on my body, on the right side, I only kept the right one on. That is where, this is a little bit graphic, but I think it's important for understanding energy and where energy gets stuck in our body and it's not flowing. That's where he held me when I was a little girl and he molested me. So that caused an energy tangle on my body that everything else is gone. I no longer have chronic pain. I didn't get any scar tissue from all the severe inflammation in my body and my heart and lungs. I mean, the doctors think it's a wonder. They think it's a miracle that I live in the body that I have today based on how sick I was. I still had this one place on my body that hurt and would wake me up occasionally at night, and that was my right hip. And so what it turned out is that one muscle, my right glute med, was on all the time. And she could tell by how I sat on the horse, I didn't use the left one, so I was riding heavy on the right side, nothing on the left side in my body. And so she asked me to turn it. It took all my focus and attention to be able to actually find that muscle and turn it on. And when I did that with Nighthawk and I rode him with that balance, then he did the same thing. He fell into a frame that usually gives me spirit tingles again to even tell you that it usually takes months to be able to develop a horse to that point. And what I did is just get balance of myself and have the inner focus. And he just fell into it. And I could still recreate it in my corral at home. And what that tells me is that when we allow, so I had a big deficit. I did the work to pay off that debt and to be able to get more energy in my body so that the body could heal and the energy would grow. And so I could have that to live from. And then to learn how to manage it and have self-mastery, I learned how to organize it and to bring it up and to hold it in kind of a higher vibration and consciousness. And that changed the world for my horse. I can't help but think that when I do that in my daily life, it will also change how I interact with all life and the commerce, and to be able to exchange, and live in communion, community, commerce at a higher level in consciousness.
Yeah. And Hertha, it's such an important ripple effect to become aware of too, because you're literally rippling how you're feeling in your body into your horses or into your clients. And I think we lose sight of that. And I always ask that question. I do a lot of social online, just kind of thought leadership. And I always end it with my hashtag of what is your ripple effect? And when we start asking that question on a regular basis, you can have a ripple effect inside yourself too. And you're describing this beautiful dance that you were literally doing with your horses, not even knowing that that's what you needed to do to get your balance. Well, how do we recalibrate in our lives after experiences that we have too? We shake it off. We, walk out of a meeting, we go, or whatever that, expression is. That's all parts of these recalibration tools. And it sounds like you're filling in those middle tools to be able to do that. So you don't have your always have to be on, and you don't have the wound side too. You've really filled out that toolbox inside of yourself. And I just commend you for doing that work and sharing it in a way that I think is super relatable for people that are like, how do I, okay, well, if one person can do it and now I can relate to it in a different way. We're not taught how to do this stuff. It's not
No.
like your parents sit you down and say, this is how you're going to calibrate your tools. You know, when you have this emotion that comes up or you're going to have this experience, it's always a mind game. And yet our bodies are downloading everything that we take in as a ledger. And, you know, that's a big part of my body of work here is everything that we carry in our mind as a memory is sacred. It's sacred to the body because the body's, the instruction is coming from the CEO of the mind, you know, that chief executive officer. So I put these into these terms and thank you for playing along with me on that because it's not an everyday conversation that people will have in business, but it's so relatable. So what other thoughts are you thinking of now that we've kind of really danced with this subject? Is there any other true mentorship that you think about coming from that attorney world? You know the business world very well. You know the contracts and the agreements. And what else should we be thinking about as an entrepreneur community into the future of commerce?
Well, first and foremost, I think the most important thing we can do is to become whole ourselves. Because in doing that, we lift ourselves up. And just like I was able to influence the horses, we will influence, you know, those we love, our families, our communities. But then the other thing I want to share is that, you know, I'm a litigation attorney. And, you know, 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, yeah, there's a lot of jackass lawyers. I deal with a lot of them. Yep, it's a bad field. Most recently, I've been saying, oh my God, it is so wonderful to talk to you. I can't believe we're having this conversation in the middle of this case. You know, and I said, don't tell anybody I'm not a badass, but I'm really enjoying talking to you. And that's actually the common conversation now. And I'm like, did I just change how I interact with other people because of changing myself? Now, I'm still being a good lawyer. I'm still doing deals. I'm still taking care of my client. But all of a sudden, all the people that I'm working with, I'm not sure all these people changed. I think I changed, and that allowed them to meet me where I'm at now. And so I invite people to think about years ago when I was shoeing horses, I was only 23 or 24, and I do 5 or 6 a day. Now, horseshoeing is very hard work physically. And if you think about it, if I'm going to wrestle with a horse, it's kind of stupid because the horse is 1,200 pounds and hopefully I'm not near that heavy to be able to work with that horse. I'm at a big disadvantage when it just comes to strength and how much space I take up. And so I always tried to figure out how to work with them and stay in balance and keep them in balance to make it easier. Having said that, one day I have all these bad horses and I'm going home and I'm driving and I'm grousing. All the horses were bad. And this voice in my head says, what was the common denominator between all these horses in these 3 different ranches? And I'm like, oh, geez, it was me. And so you carry a lesson that I learned back then at 23 or 24 to this today, recently where I just had all these really great interactions with opposing counsel who I used to think were maybe I wasn't supposed to swear. Anyhow, okay, jackasses. And now I'm like, maybe it wasn't all them. I think a lot of it depends on me and my perception. And we know from understanding Jungian psychology that when we change our inner world, I've gone through these changes now where I've seen things that, things have come out that were blocked. I've paid my bank account of being overextended. Now I get to a place where I experience life differently, and I experience life differently because the kaleidoscope of how I see myself and I understand myself has changed. And so now I understand and experience other people differently. I think that's the most important commodity commerce that we can bring anywhere in our lives. And I do believe that the more mastery we have, more self-mastery, the more that we will have all that we need, the wealth and the relationships and everything we need to make a difference in life. So first and foremost, we do our work. And then by changing ourselves, we change the world around us.
I couldn't agree more. I'm sitting here going 1,000% yes. And I've seen it in so many different areas of the community. When you see that, that peaceful approach to things, we don't have to go in and be this divisive, really overbearing type of personality, we can choose to do that. And you've already talked about how you do that. And there's times when that is required, but it gives us a choice. We have the ability to respond. That's what responsibility is. And we can be accountable for our choices and able to account for them in reflection. And so, you just play on words, and it becomes more about intention, and what kind of life do you want to walk around in every single day in your flesh, human flesh spacesuit. So I really, really love that we've ventured between, real world scenarios with contracts and attorneys and, relatable areas of situations to how do you embrace and interact with an animal that's bigger than you? I mean, you could be out in the forest and encounter a bear, and you can choose how, you respond with animals in your home. I mean, we're interacting with individuals and people every day too. And sometimes that can be a little bit animal-like too, depending on the state of that person. But I think those are just incredible tools and tips that you've given the community, Hertha, that's listening today. And I really, really thank you. So what are you up to these days? What are your projects of, these heart projects and the way that you're mentoring and leaning forward? And how do people really figure out how to work with you if there's something that really landed with them today?
I love doing retreats. And so I have a Path to Wholeness retreat, and that's where up to 8 women. I do work with men, but that's more one-on-one. They don't usually like the group work. So it's a retreat for women, and it starts on Thursday afternoon and goes to Sunday at noon. And they fly into Bozeman, probably Bozeman. You could also go to Billings and drive to the ranch. And then I have a chef, and it is a catered experience, and we work with the horses. And I have one woman I'm talking to from Chicago who called the other day. She just knows she's stuck, and she believes that she's prompted that I can help her. There's nothing I love more than to work with people and to walk with them through those, times, those parts of ourselves that scare us. My background as an attorney and then doing all my own work. And I just love working with my horse friends. So I love doing that. And we still have some spaces open September 24th to 27th. If you have any interest, my website has a place where you can have a phone call. It's a free call, and it's exploratory for you and I to decide what is your next best step for your path to wholeness, and whether it be with the retreat. I do have a website. It's Hertha at hertha-lund.com. And I'm a professional speaker. I have a book, The Alchemy of Resilience. And I will be offering a group in the fall for 6 months. We meet once a month by Zoom, and we will study together and be together each week. And I limit that to 12. And we have a transformational healing experience together through that. And I will take on a few one-on-one clients if, we talk and we think that that's what's best for you and your next step. And I love, love, love sharing what I've learned. I think I've come back, and I think my gift is to language the inner moves of healing, transformational healing.
Yeah. And it was so descriptive. And I hope that for anybody that's listening today to this episode, I mean, you can download it, listen to it a couple of times, because I think, this has been probably my 3rd conversation with Hertha, and I keep picking up new aha moments, and it's just a different way to relate to it. You don't think about it all the time. And so I do encourage you to listen a couple of times and give yourself the space, and the grace and the permission more than anything to just go down a different rabbit hole for a change and think about your body differently. Think about, how things are coming up and what's locking up inside of you. And how do you get to that treasure chest that's sitting on the inside? And that's so important for all of us because we all have it. So once again, Hertha, thank you for coming on the show. This has been an incredible exchange of value for me. I hope that it has been for the audience as well that's listening, and that it's also been a lot of fun for you to be able to share your story in a little bit different way. And thanks for dancing with me.
Loved working with you today, Connie, and you're just a joy and a treasure to spend time with. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. All right, guys, we're wrapping up. This has been another episode of Unlocking Commerce and Business. Check out some of Hertha's resources. We'll make sure we put those in the show notes. And then don't forget, I'm getting us back to the original language of money with my Rooted book. It's an ebook that's available, and don't forget to claim your sacred ledger. So we'll all talk to you. See you all again again soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Unlocking Commerce and Business. If this conversation resonated, here's what you can do. Subscribe for weekly conversations with survivors, innovators, and changemakers, building regenerative alternatives to extractive commerce. Share this episode with collaborators, partners, funders, and changemakers in your network. The people ready for restorative commerce need to hear these voices. Drop a comment below. Tell us what patterns you're recognizing or what solutions you're building. We read every one. Commerce is everywhere, and healing extraction patterns inside our communities creates regenerative commerce outside. Like a lighthouse, we're here, exploring and cutting through fog, pointing toward what works. Welcome to the era of restorative commerce. Until next time, explore courageously, build sovereignly. You are the source and store of value. This is Connie Davis signing off. Thank you for being here.